I unknowingly fed a haunted ghost. What happened next will terrify you. I never should have opened that door. It should have stayed closed. But curiosity grabbed hold of me, and I couldn't resist. The moment I turned the knob, a chill wrapped around my spine like a cold hand. I stepped into darkness, the air heavy and stale, filled with whispers that danced just beyond my hearing. My heart raced. I was alone, yet I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting. That my routine was simple. I worked from home, sipping coffee while the sun streamed in through my window. But that day, a darkness settled over my mind. I had seen something strange in my kitchen, a shadow flitting by the corner of my eye, a flicker that made the hair on my arms stand on end. I shrugged it off. Just my imagination, right? Until the door called to me. The hallway was lined with peeling wallpaper, its old floral pattern faded and grim. The floor creaked under my feet like a warning. I hesitated. Shadows loomed, stretching and twisting like gnarled fingers. The air turned icy, each breath a ghostly fog escaping my lips. I felt as if I had entered another world, a place where time stood still, steeped in secrets. Then came the noise. A soft thud, like a footstep echoing in a silence so profound it made my pulse thunder in my ears. I froze. My instincts screamed at me to run, but something anchored me in place. A soft rustle came from the room I had opened. Things shifted on the table, objects moving on their own, and I couldn't tell if it was my mind playing tricks or something more sinister. Fear wrapped around my throat, constricting tighter with every sound that echoed through the void. Another thud. Closer this time. I took a shaky step back, my vision narrowing, a lump forming in my throat. A low, mournful whisper curled through the air, calling my name. I swear, I could almost taste the dread that hung heavy like smoke. And then, just as my heart seemed to stop, the figure appeared. A silhouette emerging from the darkness. I couldn't tell if it was real or a figment of my fear. My breath hitched, a scream clawing at my chest, desperate to escape. The figure, indistinct yet chillingly familiar, took a step toward me. I stumbled back, dread pooling in my stomach. The door slammed shut behind me, shaking the walls, a finality that felt like a death knell. Darkness swallowed the light, and all I could hear was the pounding of my heart and my shallow breaths. I was trapped with a haunted ghost. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The silence after the door slammed felt almost alive, as if it was breathing, echoing the thunder of my racing heart. I felt the icy grip of panic seep into my bones. The figure stood motionless, the vague outline pulsating with an otherworldly energy that reeked of despair. Behind it, shadows swirled with a life of their own, hungry and restless. Who are you? My voice trembled, barely a whisper against the oppressive atmosphere. The air constricted further, weight pressing against my chest, as if the very fabric of reality was warping around me. The figure took a single, slow step forward, and I instinctively recoiled, colliding with the wooden desk behind me. Papers fluttered to the ground, as if a gust of wind had ripped through the room. The whisper returned, softer now, curling around my consciousness like mist. Feed me, it urged, a sound that was both pleading and commanding. I strained to catch a glimpse of its face, but the shadows obscured what should have been there, a void where features might have been. All I could see was a shapeless mass, an echo of something that once was, beckoning me closer. Fear fractured into 1,000 shards of panic. Was I really the one holding the reins here? Perhaps it was I who had stirred this slumbering horror from its eternal torment. Beads of sweat traced a path down my back as I felt a warmth envelop my skin, and every instinct told me to run. But where to? The door stood locked, a forbidding slab of wood that now seemed impenetrable. No. I shouted, a sudden burst of defiance against the overlooming dread, but it only fueled the entity's hunger. The room thrummed, vibrating with a malevolent energy. The figures on the walls seemed to flinch, grotesque paintings extending shadows like cruel fingers, reaching for me. My heart thundered in sync with the furious pounding that echoed around the room. I stumbled back as the entity surged forward under the guise of a sound, a low, guttural moan that vibrated through the air. The walls shuddered as if alive, peeling more wallpaper that drifted slowly to the ground like dying leaves. Eyes, hollow and dark, began to emerge from the void. They were everywhere, watching, unblinking, hungry. My breath quickened, each gasp a fight against suffocation. Give me what I crave, the voice clawed through the air, setting my nerves on fire. I fought to think through the haze of terror. The meals I'd prepared, the scraps left behind, perhaps it wasn't my kindness that had summoned this thing but a promise I had unwittingly made. I was feeding it. If sensing my revelation, the silhouette lunged forward, revealing a grotesque semblance of a mouth splitting open wider than any human ever could, jagged and dripping with darkness. No sound emerged from the yawning chasm, just a palpable hunger radiating from it, wanting more than mere sustenance. I desperately glanced around the room, scanning for any means of escape, when something shimmered on the table. A knife, its blade gleaming with an enticing promise of release. My mind raced. Was this an offering? A weapon? Or was it merely another trap designed to bind me further into this nightmare? The entity loomed closer, a mass of shadow and despair. I gripped the knife, its weight feeling both liberating and damning. The pulse of darkness stuttered for a moment, a fleeting moment of hesitation washing over the atmosphere. The walls groaned as if straining under the pressure of some unseen force. I could feel the shadows tightening their grip, pulling me toward the maw of the figure. Feed me. It demanded, and in that moment, I realized a sacrifice was demanded. Not just of food, but of something far more precious. My mind spiraled as I pieced together the horrifying truth. I had given it a taste of my soul. I shut my eyes against the encroaching darkness, feeling the knife slice a path through my palm, even as it dripped onto the floor. What have I done? I thought, my heart pounding frantically. The chaos closed in around me. Then, in an instant, the shadows surged, and the walls began to pulse as if alive, a howling crescendo of despair engulfing me. With fierce desperation, I flung the knife away, my fingers trembling, but the shadows did not relent. Instead, they twisted into something grotesque and more potent, a body formed of darkness, an ensnaring net of despair coming alive just for me. Suddenly, a surge of icy air shot forth, and I stood still, paralyzed, as laughter echoed hauntingly in my ears, every note dark and taunting. The walls pulsated one last time, and just as I felt myself being drawn closer to that hungry mouth, the figure released a bone-chilling shriek. In that moment of horror, the lights flickered, and chaos erupted around me, catching me off guard. My body felt weightless, and then complete darkness enveloped me. I was no longer alone in the room, for the whispers had risen to a deafening roar. Thousands of voices clamored in the void around me. Join us, they cried, the shadows reaching out, entwining my limbs, pulling me deeper into their merciless embrace, and just before I succumbed, before the darkness swallowed me whole, I saw its door had opened. An ethereal light beckoned beyond, yet it pulsed ominously, spreading a new, suffocating dread of what might await me beyond that threshold. Would I take that chance? Or was I already lost to the echoes of horrors yet unseen? The brightness of the light behind the door flickered like an overexcited flame, promising escape yet threatening to consume everything it touched. In that moment, with shadows coiling around my torso, I felt a stirring within, a primal panic mixed with desperation to flee. The other voices, once dissonant and chaotic, began to meld into a haunting harmony that chilled my bones. Join us, embrace your fate, the whispers sang, a siren call from the depths of despair. I hesitated, feeling my consciousness fragment beneath the weight of the howls vibrating through me. The entity grotesque embodiment of darkness was still lingering, waiting with its gaping maw, pulsating and hungry. But the light called to me, its edges shimmering violently in contrast to the oppressive gloom. I felt my resistance weakening, my flesh crawling with unknown dread. Summoning what little strength remained, I fought against the tentacles of shadow binding my wrists, clawing at my skin with frigid tendrils. "No! I will not join you!" I shouted into the cacophony, my voice rising above the overwhelming chaos, even as the shadows crept closer, brushing against my skin like icy fingers searching for a threshold to breach. With a final scream of defiance, I seized the light. It enveloped me instantly, a radiant warmth coursing through my veins like an electrifying jolt. The shadows recoiled, howling in a tempest of fury, and for a mere heartbeat I believed I was free. But that freedom came with a price. As I crossed the threshold into the blinding light, I felt a violent tug at my essence. The voices within the darkness screamed louder, furious with betrayal. I stumbled forward, the light fizzing and crackling around me, only to find myself not in a sanctuary, but in an equally twisted but entirely different nightmare. I emerged in a long, narrow hallway, fluorescent light sputtering overhead, casting erratic shadows that danced like frantic spirits. The walls seemed to pulsate here as well, and the air felt thick, cloying, like syrup, heavy with secrets best left buried. I could barely breathe, the anticipation in this new space echoing the dread left behind. But it wasn't just the oppressive atmosphere. Eyes stared at me from behind every door I passed. Unblinking, hollow, a tapestry of hopes dashed and dreams quashed. I felt something ominous writhe close behind me, drawing near, urging me back, taunted by invisible hands that reached, always reaching. "Come back, we are still part of you," the whispers crowed joyfully, echoing from the confines of my mind. Vindictive laughter ricocheted off the walls, a reminder that escaping one horror does not guarantee safety from another. I wanted to run, to pull myself away from their grip, but all I could do was inch closer to the end of the hallway with a trampled sense of purpose. Then I saw it. At the far end, a door stood slightly ajar, inviting and ominous all at once. I could feel a weighty terror seeping through the crack, a palpable essence that wrapped around my throat and squeezed. I was sweating now, mind racing, heart pounding like a war drum. What lay beyond? There was no turning back. The unmistakable sound of scratching clawed at my back, and I turned, seeing the silhouette of the entity forming in the fluorescent light, a remnant of the darkness I thought I had escaped. It hovered there, in the burst of illumination, as if anchored by the light itself, and all at once the faces hidden in the darkness behind me became clear, each one a reflection of torment and betrayal, including my own. Suddenly, laughter erupted in a throaty mass from behind me, a haunting chorus from all the souls entwined within that layer of torment. "You cannot run forever, you belong to us," they chanted, their voices melding into one relentless roar that thundered through the confines of the hallway. I realized, horrifyingly, that the clamor of voices was growing louder, each one a reminder of the piece of myself I had sacrificed, the piece that I had unknowingly fed to the entity. It was a cosmic balance I had unwittingly tipped, and now I stood as a tether between worlds, a bridge to their nightmares. Instinct gripped me as I lunged for the door, pushing it open against the rising cacophony. But as it swung wide, all semblance of hope dissipated. I stumbled backwards, the blinding light melting into a surreal mirage, revealing a carnival of horrors. Broken, twisted figures dined on the electricity of despair, each grotesque bite feeding the shadows of the past. My scream caught in my throat as I looked down. I was not alone. Specters from beyond, faces I recognized, began to creep closer from the shadows, hands grasping for me, including their outstretched fingers, a reflection of horrid versions of myself lost and broken. In that searing moment, I felt the weight of their hungry eyes, and the entity's haunting laughter echoed behind me, promising that escape would never be granted. Scarred hands reached past the threshold, pulling at the flesh of my being. My mind shattered under the weight of dread as I realized I was not merely a victim. They wanted me to join them, to feel their suffering, to inherit their horrors, and just as my screams echoed into the void, the door slammed shut behind me, toppling the fragile balance I had clung to. The last thing I heard before plunging into darkness again was the impassive laughter of the entity, calling me home. The darkness swallowed me whole, cocooning my senses in a suffocating embrace. I felt the remnants of the carnival's grotesqueries brush against me, their presence a clammy chill that slithered into my skin, leaching warmth and clinging to the edges of my sanity. I was adrift in a world without form, the screams of the specters echoing through the void like whispered promises of torment yet to come. Slowly, the shadows began to unfurl, reforming around me as a twisted landscape emerged. Skeletal trees twisted toward a blood-red sky with gnarled limbs, their bark oozing a thick, tar-like substance that glimmered as though it were alive. The air was thick with the scent of decay, mingling with a metallic tang that coated my tongue and made my stomach lurch. Beneath my feet, the ground felt pulpy, like damp earth soaked in despair, and each step resonated in the silence, a dreadful thud that echoed against the surrounding stillness that I stumbled forward, unable to comprehend this new horror. Where was I? I had glimpsed pieces of my life, the faces of those I loved before the door had closed behind me. Had I forsaken my chance at freedom? The laughter of the entity still reverberated in my ears, now laced with a new malevolence, urging me deeper into the heart of my fears. Movement caught my eye, a flickering shadow darting between the trees, its form shifting and elongating, barely retaining a semblance of humanity. "Help me!" cried a voice, splintered and pained, reverberating through the unease. I turned, heart racing, the urgency of another's plea igniting my long-buried empathy. Perhaps this being shared my plight, another lost soul in need of rescue. "Where are you?" I called out, my voice trembling against the backdrop of oppressive silence. "I can help you, help," echoed the voice, but the pleading morphed into a mocking slur, ripping the sorrow from its core. "Help yourself. You have already fed on despair, embraced the anguish, you are one of us." The shadow slipped between the gnarled trees, revealing faces contorted in grief, mouths upturned in sickly smiles, all morphing into a horrific semblance of familiarity. I gasped, backing away, as they slithered into view, me friends, my family, their features now ghostly and thin, stretching towards me in grotesque parody of compassion. "We loved you," one of them rasped, the apparition's voice dripping with a sweet poison. "Join us in this eternal dance, let us enjoy the suffering together. No. I roared, horrified. "You aren't real." The laughter of the entity writhed in the distance, a sinister hum vibrating through my bones, coaxing answers from the void. I turned and ran, dodging grasping hands that reached out from the shadows, each touch invigorating the fear swelling within me. My heart hammered against my ribcage, the echoes of their need wrapping around me like chains dragging me down. Ahead, a faint light shimmered in the ethereal haze, pulsating softly like a heartbeat, an eerie pulse that beckoned and terrified in equal measure. It flickered alluringly, promising warmth and perhaps a shred of salvation. As I raced toward it, the shadows shifted behind me, gathering in wrathful ferocity. The malevolent whispers grew into a crescendo, drowning my thoughts in an avalanche of despairing shrieks. "Flee and you'll perish. You cannot escape who you are," they screeched, a haunting symphony of wailing souls, reverberating through my core. "You are ours now," I burst through the thicket, face steeped in terror as the light enveloped me. But it wasn't the sanctuary I hoped for. Instead, it was a kaleidoscope of horrors, swirling visions projected into my mind's eye, a fragmented reality. Scenes from my life twisted grotesquely, laughter morphing into shrieks, joy shifting into suffering, love devoured by betrayal. I faltered, overwhelmed. I had not fed on their despair, I had become it. The realization clawed at my throat, the depths of my own anguish were a banquet for whatever festering madness thrived in the void. Then, the ground beneath me shifted, and I was plummeting, as the very essence of the world around me quaked. I landed with a jarring thud in a sprawling void, where grotesque laughter encircled me once more. It had returned, filling the air with the scent of charred regret as the countless faces gathered around, their hollow eyes gleaming. "Welcome back," a voice drawled, sensuous and sibilant. "You have arrived at the feast. We have been waiting, and now, it is your turn to devour." As whispers erupted into manic cacophony, I felt the shadows close in, the weight of countless lost souls pressing against me. "You are one of us," they moaned, and as they converged, the sky above darkened, deafening me with laughter that pierced the very fabric of my being. I braced for the inevitable, for the hollow joy of their embrace as the shadows blanketed me like a shroud, plunging me into the profound depths of madness. And just as I thought the end had come, a singular voice broke through the howling chaos, clear and resonant: "You have not yet met your demise. Will you choose to stand against it?" A weighty silence fell, and as I looked back at the wailing mass, a new dread seeped into my heart. A choice lay before me, the entity's laughter echoing still, as I realized choosing meant facing my very essence. Would I be brave enough to confront the unfathomable horror that lay ahead? Or was surrender the only way forward? And just as the decision loomed, the shadows surged forward, beckoning me into the dark unknown. The shadows enveloped me, their cool touch both terrifying and inviting, as if they held the essence of my deepest fears within their ethereal grasp. With each breath I took, I felt them stir, like ravenous entities eager for the taste of dread that was beginning to rewrite my very being. I stood at the precipice of a reckoning, my heart pounding like a war drum in the suffocating dark. Will you choose to stand against it? The words of that singular voice reverberated through the cacophony, echoing off the fleeting memories that fought for purchase beneath the weight of despair. But what did it mean to stand against it? What could I possibly wield against such overwhelming darkness? The swirling mass of shadowed faces pressed ever closer, their expressions shifting from grotesque sympathy to unbridled hunger. The longer I hesitated, fight or flee, I whispered to myself, grappling with the electric pull of the unseen forces surrounding me. In the fragmented haze of my past, I glimpsed the faces I once knew: friends, family, even strangers, each one a flicker in the shadows of torment. They all screamed in unison, each life ushered into the void whispering my name, urging that I either join their torment or reclaim my own fleeting sense of self. Among them, I perceived a figure breaking free from the moss, a single silhouette, its shape distinct yet familiar. It was the ghost of my childhood best friend, Sarah, her eyes hollow but somehow glimmering with purpose. "Don't let them take you. Remember the light," she cried, her voice slicing through the gloom like a razor. Confusion overwhelmed me. "The light? What light?" I shouted, but she began to disintegrate into the shadowy tide, her form retreating as if the darkness was a living force snatching her away from me. Panic surged within, and instinct took over. I braced myself and took my first step forward, my feet squishing into the pulpy ground, but that brief motion seemed to send a ripple through the shadows. As I pressed further, I felt the weight of the void shift with every determined inch, each heartbeat imbuing me with a fraction of courage. "Enough!" I screamed, forcing those words through clenched teeth, my defiance breaking the oppressive silence. The shadows hesitated, recoiling as if my voice carried an ethereal blade, cutting through their insatiable yearning. And then I remembered. I clasped high the residual light of my fondest memory, summoning the joyous laughter of Sarah and the rest, coaxing that pure essence into shape. "You don't define me," I roared, the intensity of conviction fueling my voice. "I carve my own fate." As I stood amid that vortex of despair, something changed. Emerging from the heart of the dark was an incandescent glow, the flicker of warmth battling against the chill that encased me. It danced at the edges of consciousness, bold, bright, and unyielding. I could feel it coiling around me, pressing back against the oppressive mass of shadows as I poured my will into that light, allowing hope to seep into my bones. But the shadows retaliated, a seething cacophony of cries erupting in fury. They scattered for a brief moment, only to regroup, converging like a storm-gathering force. Their frustration became tangible, vibrating through the air, chilling me to the marrow. "You are lost. You cannot escape your fate." The amalgamation of voices bellowed, and behind the peals of anger, I heard the faintest sound, the hum of something alive, a primal wrath yearning for vengeance. That's when I felt a sudden tug at my core. A shadowy tendril snaked from the ground towards me, slick and sinuous, wrapping around my ankle like a serpent. I stumbled but regained my footing, determination coursing through me. Yet, the darkness refused to relent, and it beckoned, reiterating promises of power and unveiling deep-seated fears long since buried. A vision flashed before my eyes, a barren landscape devoid of color, my family's faces frozen in anguish etched into the very fabric of the setting. It played out like a nightmare, the consequences of my past actions dancing cruelly before me. Desperation twisted a knife in my gut, and I screamed back at the shadows, "You will not dictate my reality." With resolve, I lunged deeper into the radiance growing within, summoning fragmented pieces of joy and resilience. The pulse of light surged, expanding, emitting warmth that pushed back the tendrils encroaching upon me. But just as fusion with that light grew, the shadows recoiled and unleashed a final assault. Tendrils darted towards me in countless numbers, cruel whispers escalating into a symphony of dread, as they shrieked words that chilled my resolve to the bone. In the end, we will find you. Your true self will be ours. Fingers of darkness pierced the edges of my glorious glow and overwhelmed the light momentarily, and everything imploded into a chaos of shrieks and happiness being torn asunder. I fought against despair and clung desperately to the dwindling flicker of light, yet it was surrounded, engulfed. The world dimmed, collapsing around me, a storm of agony and whispers spiraling into infinity, dragging me down into the fathomless abyss of malevolence. And then, as my consciousness began to unravel, I felt a sudden new surge of dread wrenching me from my escape. A singular echo resonated through the darkness as if the very universe held its breath, proclaiming in a single voice, "Face what you fear most or lose yourself altogether," and as the void loomed around me, the haunting reality morphed, revealing another choice and a new horror clawing its way to the surface of my mind. Would I confront the darkness within, or let it consume me entirely? Would I join the grotesque feast, or carve a new path amidst the malevolence? The shadows tightened their hold, the weight of choice pressing down on my shoulders like a boulder poised to crush. In that heart-stopping moment, I realized the final decision loomed larger than ever, and the horror of realization dawned me. True monstrosity awaited within, hungering for release. And just as I thought escape was grasping me, the shadows roared with fury, shifting once more, ushering an unfathomable truth wrapped in a chilling promise: welcome home. The disarray of light and shadow around me pulsated with a life of its own, thrumming against my senses like an impending storm. I felt the weight of their promises pressing into my skin, relentless, dragging me deeper into the mire. My heart raced as I instinctively sought the warmth of the incandescent glow, but it flickered like a candle caught in a tempest. "Welcome home," they had said, their voices intermingling like a macabre chant. The phrase slithered into my thoughts, twisting like a vine of briars around my mind, igniting the depths of my past. Fear mingled with a perverse curiosity, pushing me to confront the questions gnawing at my sanity. What did they mean by home? Was I meant to embrace this darkness within, to merge with it and wield its power as my own? The shadows closed in further, the air thickening with an acrid stench, a mix of decay and something sweetly sickening. An unholy laughter echoed from the abyss, rising and twisting through the vapors like a serpent through grass. Faint silhouettes appeared, grotesque and writhing, their mouths moving, forming words that sent spikes of ice through my spine. "Join us. Come play." They sang, their tone like a lullaby steeped in malice. I clenched my fists, caught in a whirlwind of terror and temptation, teetering on the precipice of surrender. As their croons wrapped around me, I was struck by visions of other souls caught in their gluttonous embrace. I saw faces I recognized, friends I had lost in the cruel passages of life, trapped in endless cycles of despair, their eyes clouded with the same yearning that clawed at my own heart. Their hands reached out, grasping for me, fingers molding into talons, drawing me in as shadows coalesced into a vortex of despair. "Help us," they whispered, their voices echoes of longing. "Be one of us." I shivered and staggered back, torn between a longing to rescue and the primal urge to flee. The glow within me flickered violently, struggling to maintain its hold against the encroaching night. I had to remember Sarah's words. "The light, I have to remember the light," I murmured, but with each repetition, my thoughts became lost amidst the clamor, ghosts of my own tragedy merging into a symphony that crescendoed with every heartbeat. Then, something within me stirred, a memory resurfacing like a fleeting moment of clarity amid the rising tide of despair. The time Sarah had pulled me away from the edge of the forest when I had strayed too far, the warmth of her laughter as we danced in the rain, the unwavering love that anchored my childhood. "You need to find that light within you. Your past does not own you." Her voice rang out in my thoughts, with newfound resolve. I raised my chin. No! I screamed into the gathering storm. I will not become a pawn in your game. You will not take me. The shadows recoiled, momentarily stunned by my defiance. I could feel the light struggling to burgeon anew, drawing energy from the corners of my aching heart. But just then, the shadows shifted, swirling into an even darker form, a grotesque mass coalescing into a singularity dark queen, it seemed, who stood before me with an ominous grin. Her face flickered like an unstable flame, shifting through the faces of those I had lost as she leaned closer, her breath cold against my skin. Foolish child. You seek the light, but the darkness is your destiny. Every fear, every regret, every choice has led you here. Embrace it, dear one. That I could feel the tendrils once more, caressing my limbs like lovers' touch, try to whisper sweet seductions of power and safety. Fight or flee, I whispered, grasping Sarah's memory like a lifeline, yearning for the warmth of friendship to cut through the encroaching chill. In that moment, the shadows surged anew, ravenously gnashing their teeth, hungry for my surrender. The very air around me thickened, oppressive and stifling. I could no longer discern where the shadows ended, and I began, my own identity muddied by the weight of lingering fears bubbling to the surface. Suddenly, an unintended scream erupted from my throat, fiercer than before, and the Shadow Queen's eyes widened, surprise mingling with a visceral hunger. There it is! The darkness feed me! She crooned, stretching her arms like the wretched branches of a vortex tree, the shadows swirling quicker, pulling tighter around me. No. You're wrong. I cried. I am the light. Dread pierced my heart as I felt the edges of my body dissolve into that sticky fog. It was no longer the shadows that encroached. I comprehended, with growing horror, that the darkest part of myself was awakening, growing bold, slithering from the depths I had buried it in self-loathing, anger, regrets woven into the tapestry of my existence, hungry for release. Come home. The shadows beckoned, and in their call, I felt the seductive caress of release. And then, from the deepest depths of my mind, I heard a laugh that once sounded so innocent, now twisting and taunting as shadows flickered and fell apart like autumn leaves in a chaotic breeze. Sarah's voicino, it was the darkness, mimicking her, mocking me, drawing me closer with promises of peace that felt simultaneously warm and damning. Just as I felt myself on the brink of succumbing, the darkness quaking around me, the face of the Shadow Queen changed again, a grotesque imitation of Sarah's visage, eyes swirling with cosmic malevolence that bore into my very soul. You choose this fate. Let go, and you will never have to feel pain again. My heart dropped as realizations flooded over me, but before I could muster a response, her voice descended like a siren's hymn, compelling and horrifying, and the shadows surged, electrifying the air and enveloping me. In that instant of terror-laced clarity, I became acutely aware of the ground beneath me shifting, swirling, transforming as if the earth itself craved me. The specter of my past emerged next to the queen, a cold breeze sweeping through me. I recognized the figure. It was my father, radiant yet ghastly, tortured by remorse and shadows, reaching towards me with outstretched hands. Help us, free us, the chant echoed, the darkness unified this time, pulling me deeper into the pulse of forgotten depths. And as I stood at this precipice of dread, caught between the intricate web of guilt and the ghostly faces urging me closer, I finally realized this was not just a burden to shoulder, this was a fight for my very soul. With desperation consuming me, I struggled against the overwhelming tide. I will not stay here. I screamed, clenching my fists until my nails dug into my palms, the pain anchoring me for just a moment longer, and then, amidst the bedlam, I heard the familiar sound of laughter, the real Sarah's laughter, echoing just beyond the shadows. Faint, yet definite. A guiding beacon cutting through the chaos, promising hope. But it seemed that the shadows, in their insatiable hunger, understood the power of that reminder too. In an instant, the laughter was engulfed, swallowed by the darkness, echoing into nothingness. Do you hear that? The Shadow Queen hissed, her face twisting into a malevolent grin that mirrored my deepest fears. Silence reigns now. Your light is extinguished. You belong to us. The last whispered syllables echoed eerily through the air, as my entire being quaked in knowing dread. Just as those words struck, the ground faded beneath my feet, and I felt myself falling. The world stood still for a brief moment, the shadows subdued, waiting with bated breath. And then, a sound that shook the very fabric of reality emerged, a desperate yell, rippling through the dark like a gauntlet thrown, mingling hope with horror. I landed in an abyss, my feet rebounding off a surface so foreign. As the shadows lingered above, a new voice split the silence, raw and tinged with malice. "You can't escape. You're already one of us. Welcome to the heart of the void." And as I drifted into the depths of my own despair, the realization hit me like a thunderclap: the true monstrosity lay not beneath the surface but tangled within, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And then I saw a pair of piercing eyes staring back at me through the abyss. Me. Own. The shadows loomed closer, ominous and insatiable, tightening like a noose, and I knew in that horrific instant that the true horror was just beginning. The darkness enveloped me with a silky embrace, both suffocating and intoxicating. My heart pounded wildly against the infinite void, a frantic prisoner searching for a way out, but the shadows breathed life into my fears, carving them deeper into the fabric of my mind. The ground beneath me felt like liquid, swirling endlessly, as my own face stared back, horrified and pleading from within the writhing pit, eyes glimmering with tears of despair. "Help us, save yourself." My echo cried, a marionette bound by strings I could not see, caught in the terrifying dance of powerlessness. And with every heartbeat, I felt the weight of malicious breath tickling my neck, eager to snatch the last shreds of my consciousness. The chuckles around me morphed into shrieks, unearthly laughter that slashed at my sanity, as though I were drifting between realms, unanchored by the gravity of reality. The manifestations of my past surged forward, distorted reflections of the faces I once loved: Sarah's, my father's, friends who had become mere whispers of memories lost to time, wrapped in agony, their intentions unclear beneath the shroud of the shadows. "Join us." They beckoned, their voices a sickening chant layered over one another, crackling with a sinister delight. "You cannot resist the truth of who you are. It is much easier to surrender." I took deep breaths, desperately seeking my center amidst the chaos. The warmth I had felt before flickered dimly within me, a tiny candle fighting an unrelenting storm. I could still hear Sarah's laughter echoing faintly, the pure sound entwining with the sinister cacophony. But just as quickly, it was snuffed out, leaving a void so profound that it threatened to swallow my last shreds of hope. I fought against the encroaching shadows, desperate to reclaim myself. "You lie," I shouted into the maelstrom. "My own flesh will not betray me. I will not merge with your darkness." With renewed fervor, I began to conjure images of the life I had lived: the gentle touch of sunlight on my skin, the kindness of laughter shared, the love that dwelled within even the darkest parts of my being. But the shadows were relentless, howling in a symphony of anguish that tore at the walls of my mind. "Fool!" the Shadow Queen hissed, her voice layered with countless whispers, sharp as shards of glass. "You cannot escape what you are. We are all that remains of you, and consciousness shall return to the void from which it came." I felt the fear bubbling into panic, a scorching tide that threatened to engulf me whole. The memories of my father manifested now, his silhouette looming large, arms stretched wide, shadowy tendrils intertwining around him, forming a grotesque tapestry of despair. "You are too weak. Did you forget?" he reprimanded, not with malice, but with a cold indifference that settled like frost across my skin. "You belong to this darkness, a cruel companion to your weaknesses." No. I screamed, my voice swallowed by the clamor of tortured souls. A surge of energy pulsated within me, a flicker of resilience willing to burn brighter than the encroaching void. As the shadows surged forward, I unleashed that energy with a roaring desperation. Light burst forth like a supernova, sending tendrils of shadows recoiling violently. The illumination seared through the darkness, revealing figures trapped within, their faces twisting in horror and yearning. Souls lost, crying out in agony yet holding on to a glimmer of hope, spirits disguised as companions now revealed as prisoners in this dark realm. And in my moment of clarity, I saw a doorway, shimmering faintly, just out of reach. My existence was thrumming against the fabric of reality, the shadows hissing and clawing, desperate to reclaim their prey. If I could just reach out, but the Shadow Queen would not be denied, swirling closer, a tempest of rage feeding on my defiance. You think you can refuse me forever? She snarled, her voice echoing through my mind like thunder. You are bound to us. Yield or succumb to the abyss. Cacophonous laughter erupted from her as the shadows clawed at my mind, igniting old wounds, the guilt of loss, the scars of betrayal. You'll never go back. They taunted, the laughter weaving through my consciousness like a noose tightening around my throat. This is your true home now. Let them go. A sudden voice broke through like a spear of light, an unexpected ally amidst the darkness, both agonized and filled with fire. Their souls deserve more. Suddenly, my heart lurched as a shadowy apparition stepped forth, an image of Sarah, her form flickering like a flame, eyes radiating fierce determination. Fight, my friend. We are not alone. With her presence fueling my determination, I thrust my arms forward, capturing the last remnants of light within me, and sent it pulsing toward the doorway. It shimmered as it met the warmth of my inner glow, a bridge forming not just to escape, but a tunnel of possibilities. Every soul caught in the shadows was starting to awaken, igniting in response to my blaze. The queen howled, her rage piercing the veil of my resolve. No. You will not leave. You cannot defy the darkness. But I felt the winds of change, a surge of collective energy melding together, a cry of unity igniting in the night, a harmonious chorus battling against despair. The shadows screeched, distorting into a grotesque stillness, trembling like wild waves crashing against fragile rocks. Then abruptly, the ground beneath me cracked, the shadows swirling with renewed madness. Just as the doorway beckoned me forth, closing the chasm of terror, the queen lunged, her face morphing into a morbid visage of hunger, reaching for Sarah's ghostly form as she grasped for me. No! I shouted, a visceral roar echoing through the darkness. I raced forward, every ounce of purpose binding me to the light, the illusory specter of Sarah pulling me deeper into the brightening void. But in that desperate moment, the ground fractured further, tearing reality asunder, and a dark void threatened to engulf everything me. Light, Sarah, the essence of hope, all collapsing backward into shadow. With one last glance at the flickering doorway, I felt the last fragment of my soul shatter against the insatiable darkness. As the abyss clawed at every part of me, the last thing I heard was Sarah's fading voice, a promise, a warning, a haunting reminder of everything I fought for. Remember, I will always be with you even in the shadows. And then, silence reigned over the void, an unending expanse that echoed the pulsing heartbeat of the night. Me heart caught between the realms of darkness and light, and then, from the depths of the silence, I felt a tremor, an ancient pulse awakening from the inky blackness. Your journey is far from over, it whispered, slithering around my consciousness, igniting the fear within me once more. Welcome to the edge of despair. As the realization dawned upon me, I stood poised between fear and faith, as phantom-like echoes began to rise, a promise of more horrors to come, lurking just beyond my reach, ready to test my resolve once again. The silence was shattered by the eerie crackle of static, a sound that pulsed through the dark like an ominous heartbeat. I felt a chill race down my spine as tendrils of shadow brushed against my skin, cold fingers that danced along the edges of my sanity. What are you? I whispered to the silent void, half expecting an answer, half terrified of what might respond. The shadows around me shifted, swirling like a miasma, and with sudden clarity, I recognized the flickering memories of the lost souls I had glimpsed before, the faded whispers of those who had been consumed, swept into the depths of this accursed place. I shivered at the thought of them, forever trapped within the shroud of darkness, their cries a haunting melody against the silence. What if they want me to join them? As that thought lanced through my mind, I felt the darkness grow heavier, pressing down upon me like a great weight of despair blossoming in the pit of my stomach. I muttered, more to myself than to the unseen shadows that encased me. I want to succumb, but before I could gather my resolve, a voice cut through the murk like a jagged blade, a voice that churned the air with palpable tension. You're not alone in your suffering, it rasped. The sound twisted around me, seducing and repelling in equal parts. It was softer than the growls that had haunted my mind, yet it dripped with the venom of shared pain. "Who are you?" I cried, my voice wavering in response to the encroaching dread. "Someone who knows your sorrow intimately," it responded, circling around me, seeping through the shadows that choked the darkness. An apparition took shape before me, a figure of shifting silhouettes and luminescent eyes. The eyes danced with unearthly fires, igniting the space with a treacherous illumination. "You are not the only one to feed the ghost of a haunted past," memories began to flood my mind, gently tugging me back to the surface of my existence, the small moments of joy that had been eclipsed by the weight of loss. I could feel Sarah's laughter fading within me, replaced by the yearning echoes of those I'd left behind. "What do you want?" I demanded, anger momentarily overcoming my fear. "To show you the depths of your despair, to give you a choice," the apparition whispered, its form undulating, flickering like an old film in a forgotten theater. "Your pain, every heartbeat of anguish, is a feast for the hungry jaws of the abyss. Every moment you dwell in the shadows brings another soul that can be both a prisoner and a companion." With horror swelling in my chest, I realized their intent. "You want me to create more?" I choked. "More souls for this dark realm?" A chilling laugh echoed in the air, harmonized with the cries of tormented echoes that lingered like smoke. "Not just to feed. To uncover. The darkness is hungry for those who dare to seek the truth. Accept your place, and fight no longer," I repeated slowly, as the realization crashed down upon me. The losses I faced, the despair that twisted every joy I had ever held. What if I had been wrong to resist? "Join us," the whisper coiled around my consciousness again, alluringly seductive, as the sepulchral figure reached its hand toward me. "Embrace the shadows that dwell within. Let us awaken the spirits trapped inside you." As its fingers glowed with an ominous light, I felt the shadows writhing around me, calling for my surrender, urging me to let go of all that had ever bound me to the light. "You will be free of pain," the voice cooed, echoing my own fears. Suddenly, a shudder rippled through the darkness, causing the apparition to flicker and wane. "You're too strong for them," it hissed, confusion and frustration etched into the shifting shadows. "But it will not be long before they find ways to break you. The darkness knows your weaknesses. Enough." I shouted, gathering what was left of my courage, the last embers of the light that still flickered within my chest. "I will not allow you to consume me," but before I could turn away, a gasp rippled across the ethereal expanse, soft, fragile, and painfully familiar. "Help! Me, I am here, please." It was Sarah's voice, resonating deep within the darkness, but it sounded warped and distorted. "Sarah!" I cried, desperation igniting my resolve anew. "Where are you, trapped, hidden beneath the shadows? You must come for me." The urgency in her voice was laced with a terror that gripped my heart. "You have the power to break through the veil, then guide me. Show me the way." I felt the shadows closing in, but within that space of terror, a flicker of hope ignited me. Connection to her could be the key. But as I strained to find her, the laughter erupted once more, echoing through the hollow space around me. "This is all part of the game, dear friend. To awaken the dead requires more than mere feeble willingness," the specter gurgled, malevolence spilling from each syllable. "The darkness has a taste for betrayal." Before I could respond, a surge of cold swept over me, and I felt the ground beneath me shift, the vibrations cracking through the air like thunder. I could sense an inescapable pull, forcing me backward, not toward Sarah, but deeper into the waiting maw of the abyss. No. "I will not let you take me. I will save her." Shouting defiantly, I felt the spiraling shadows clawing fiercely at my form, as if seeking to tear me apart from the inside out. But then, just as I felt myself slipping away, I caught a glimpse of something flickering in the distancia, new doorway, shimmering like a portal smeared with joy and laughter, surrounded by a haze of warmth. Behind it loomed a figure flanked by shadows, their face obscured, eerily fragile under the weight of the shadows. "Your choice must be made swiftly," the voice murmured, a confidant tethered in the balance of dread and relief. "What will you sacrifice to save the remnants of love?" the spectre behind me lunged, malice dripping from its presence, and I was left hanging on the precipice between the darkness and that flickering promise of light, teetering over an abyss of my own making. And then the whispers roared, a cacophony of voices, anguished and desperate. Choose now. Your souls are waiting. With a trembling heart, I faced my own hellish choice, the pull of the shadows growing stronger with every heartbeat as I grasped desperately for the light that seemed more distant than ever, feeling the looming threat of the darkness that promised to consume everything in my wake. But the last strand of hope, my tether to Sarah, flickered defiantly before me, and as the chasm gaped ever wider, I made my decision with the shadows leaping towards my fragile form, ready to wipe my choices clean, and a scream caught in my throat. I teetered on the brink of despair and illumination. The darkness closed in around me, and all fell silent, save for one haunting question that echoed in my mind. What would you sacrifice? The weight of the shadows pressed harder, an unyielding force that clawed at my very essence, demanding a price for my warmth. The last whispers of Sarah's voice melded with the tempest of despair swirling around me, igniting the fear that had buried itself deep within. What would you sacrifice? The question loomed like an axe suspended over my neck, waiting to fall. Everything I had endured flashed before me, fragments of laughter, the innocuous memories with Sarah now drenched in sorrow, the weight of loneliness that snaked through my veins. The shadows whispered sweet promises of power, of liberation from the torment they had crafted, but I held my breath, defiant against the encroaching darkness. No, I gasped, swallowing bitterness as the apparitional figure twined around me like a serpent, tighter, colder. But when I looked toward the small flicker of hope guiding me, it was no longer Sarah's warmth I discerned. It morphed into a silhouette, one that mirrored her form yet glimmered with a hostile shimmer. I felt my heart seize as recognition pierced through the fog. No, not you. I shrieked, my voice splintering in the darkness. The tainted resemblance of Sarah, warped from grief into an echoing monstrosity, reached out with elongated fingers, each movement seeming to taunt and entice the desperate part of my being. You yearn to save that which has been lost, it hissed, the once soft lilt now a chilling parody. But you'll find that to save one soul, another must pay the toll. A scream, raw and primal, erupted from my mouth, but no sound shattered the desolation encasing me. As the night's grasp thickened, I felt the veil between my longing and the shadows around me growing thin. The spectre of fire with malevolence darted closer. You will witness the sacrifice soon enough, your own choice pulled into the depths. With every ounce of will, I focused on reaching the door still shimmering in that murky haze. It flickered, a beacon of the life I longed to reclaim, but every attempted step sent convulsions of despair shooting through my limbs. The shrouded figure laughed, a sound made of broken glass, sharp and cruel. This is where you falter, dear one. You cannot overcome what has been summoned by your own grief. I felt the air grow colder, bitter as it rushed past me, swirling with venomous whispers, wrapping around my mind like a noose. Your loved ones, their suffering feeds you, it empowers you. Would you erase every sorrow for the hope of love? And then, like a tide receding, I felt the shadows in me stir with an urgent longing, discontented spirits clamoring for release. The anguish wrought by loss began an exquisite dance, beckoning me toward my destiny, toward relinquishing my battle. I could feel their pain resonate within me, desperate to connect, to weave into my very heart, and it was intoxicating. Could I truly endure this? I thought, horrified yet entranced, for what was unclaimed grief but a grim binding for those I loved? Their gnashing cries were desperate now. Join us. Fulfill your destiny. Let your heart ignite their flame. Struggling against both the looming darkness and the echoed pleas of lost souls, I faltered yet again, grappling with a choice that threatened every part of my being. No. I can't. Just then, I stumbled backward, my body colliding sharply with the remnants of life and memories I had clung to, and I gasped as the darkness roared in unison, a cacophony of damning snippets that tugged at the fraying edges of my sanity. But then came that soft, haunting voice again. Remember me, choose wisely. It was Sarah's voice, yet it echoed strangely hollow, laced with something darker, something it had hinted at, a truth buried deep that was suddenly clawing to the surface. The spectre's curling shadows surged toward me, breaking my concentration, and I gripped my head in agony as I felt consciousness sway. No. I could not lose sight of her. What did you sacrifice? I yelled into the void, my voice splintering with desperation. What did you give to this darkness? The cacophony ceased, leaving only silence. The very air seemed to shimmer around me, heavy with an inscrutable presence. I felt smothered yet electrified, engulfed in a fog that spiraled with uncertainty. The shadows hesitated, and for a fleeting moment, the air felt lighter, almost welcoming, as if the universe were holding its breath, but that moment shattered as something twisted and visceral unfurled from the depths of the dark, a grotesque tapestry of faces and hands clawing at the edges of reality, pleading, begging, their groans a horrible symphony that threatened to split the fabric of my mind. This was no mere choice, it was a war within, a psychic battlefield of unending sorrow seeking slaughter. Embrace your sacrifice. The specter bellowed over the din of lost souls, its silhouette shifting violently, warping like a nightmare unfurling across my vision. As the wailing reached a crescendo, the ethereal doorway beckoned more forcefully, an illuminated labyrinth that seemed to pulse with the promise of salvation. But there stood those shadows, insatiable, ready to snatch me away, ready to reclaim me into their relentless embrace. Choose. Or be consumed. I stared down that hellish abyss, caught between the flickering warmth of life and the unforgiving wall of despair closing in from all sides. Could I truly sacrifice what I loved? Could I bear the weight of this torment? And at that moment, a harrowing realization descended into my heart, a darkness that swallowed every other thought. Straining to reach for Sarah one last time, I felt my will begin to fracture under the immense pressure, but as I made my breathless decision, it felt as if the very fabric of reality splintered and tore open. There before me, a frozen reflection took form, a darker aspect of my existence, an entity that was both me and yet utterly alien. As the abyss roared its hunger, I barely caught a glimpse of what was approaching, a new horror that slithered forth from my own soul, and with it rose the chilling question, what have you truly sacrificed? I screamed as the shadows devoured the light around me, ready to greet whatever waited in the dark. The last vestige of doubt shattered, uncertainty giving way to foreboding dread, and I was left dangling over the brink, the abyss yawning wide beneath me, its voice relentless and insistent, time to pay. I lie still in the suffocating darkness, my ragged breath mingling with the palpable silence, hoping, praying to awaken from this nightmare. But nightmares, it seems, have a way of collapsing the mind, twisting reality until every semblance of hope is choked out. The suffocating shadows breathe with me, swirling around my limbs like the cold tendrils of a nightmare. I was swept into a web woven from my own fears, lost among tormented whispers that clawed at my sanity, taunting, teasing, beckoning me to surrender to their sweet despair. Welcome home, they hissed, their voices layered like 1,000 haunting melodies bleeding together. Each note cut deeper than the last. Home? What did that even mean anymore? Flickering images of laughter, fleeting glimpses of joy, every cherished moment murdered by despair clouded my every thought. My shadowed past surged forward, demanding my allegiance, begging for the warmth of my recognition. That warmth, however, felt so far from me now. I had abandoned it willingly, clawing at the frayed edges of my sanity, all for a taste of the forbidden darkness that consumed memories once held dear. Your family awaits, the specter of Sarah echoed in shimmering tones, her shadow flitting between reality and phantom. They are with you. The depths of sorrow wrapped around my heart, echoing a void that left nothing but guilt in its wake. The cost of their presence, what would it be? I felt my heart quiver as the shadows twisted into grotesque shapes, revealing the faces of loved ones lost, their eyes deeply sunken, mouths moving, pleading, drawing closer, imploring me to join them. No. I cried, shaking my head as if I could cast them away, yet each denial sent reverberations through the abyss, beckoning them closer still. You are not who you were, sweet child, we merely long for what you have hidden, they crooned, their voices wrapping around me with ethereal caresses. They whispered promises of comfort, freedom from suffering, making my very soul ache with the weight of unfulfilled love, their presence igniting memories of times too painful to recall. Sacrifice for love, the Shadow Queen hissed, emerging from the depths like an icy specter, wielding the pain of betrayal like a weapon. To save your past, you must reclaim the void with your essence. You know what must be done. Every heartbeat thundered through me as dread flooded my senses. I couldn't know, I wouldn't. Yet, in that tumultuous place, I felt a flicker resonate within, a desperate spark began to rise against the cacophony of shadows, clawing its way toward the whispered echoes of hope. Sarah, I called, but my voice trembled in the face of agony swirling around me. Can I save you? Yes, her ghostly voice answered, laced with a bittersweet timbre that cut deeper than any dagger. But know this, to save me, you must become one with the darkness. Embrace it. Learn to wield it was then I understood. This was no mere battle for survival, this was a war against my own soul. I could feel my heart sink, torn between the allure of relief it promised and the consequence of pure obliteration. Was love worth the price? Every trembling, aching part of me screamed for release, yet that hidden flicker urged me to cast aside the darkness that longed to swallow me whole. In that unyielding silence, realization washed over me, clearer than the stubborn pain throbbing in my chest. To save my pasto rescue Sarai needed to confront my own darkness, expose the shards buried within until I stood unshackled by a fear cultivated by my own hand. Then it hit me, crashing against my fragile resolve like waves against stone. I had stood against the darkness but never confronted the heart of its truth buried within me, the darkness I had sought to escape. The power to overcome lay within, not in escaping from the past, but embracing it in its entirety. I had unknowingly fed this monstrosity with my sorrow and regret, yet it was also a reflection of my desires lost and suffocated under the weight of abandonment. Just as you shaped our despair, I whispered, finally grasping the essence of what I needed to do. I will reshape this. The shadows recoiled as I reached deep within, casting aside the mantle of fear and digging for hope buried beneath the layers of anguish, reclaiming what was lost: love, warmth, childhood laughter. The tendrils coiled tighter around me, but I pushed into that unbearable pressure. I will not surrender. The words rang with newfound strength, cascading through the void, like a battle cry in the midst of defeat. With each exhalation, I summoned forth the light, not just mine, but the echoes of those I had lost, binding their essences to form an invisible shield. The truth crystallized in that moment. Every person shaped my reality, and their fragments of love grew stronger as I called to them. Flickering images flooded my mind, memories of laughter, kindness, family gatherings, each glowing with a warmth I had almost forgotten. Together I shouted against the rising shadows. We are bound not by despair but hope. And within that proclamation, the shadows began to disintegrate, their hold on me diminished as flashes of life illuminated the void, a tempest swirling in a furious dance of light and darkness. The specter of the Shadow Queen swirled in fury, eyes alight with seething rage as she grappled against the encroaching light. You think you can deny your lineage? She screeched. You cannot escape this reality, yet the reality had already begun to change. With every word I spoke, the laughter of those lost souls became arrows against the darkness, piercing through the veil with echoes of joy. I reclaim my past, my love, my power. I shouted, fists clenched tight as I drove the words from my core. My heart belongs to the light, and I will mold the darkness. Just as I pushed deeper, reaching for the very essence that defined me, an integral piece of Sarah's spirit flickered, breaking from the Shadowsa vibrant light racked with energy. It surged toward me, intermixed with the beings of light I had summoned, melding, wrapping around my heart, binding me to the colorful essence of love itself, and as the collision of shadows and light reached its climax, I stood firm, bold against the urges to flee as whispers turned to cries of anguish. Brightness filled every crevice of my being as the two forces clashed violently. I felt the very fabric of existence tremble and warp, the void buckling beneath the true realization that I could stand against them. You will not claim me. I screamed, and in that defiance, the darkness began to crumble, surrendering the grip it had held over my heart. But just as it shattered, I understood. It wasn't just about casting away shadows, it was about acknowledging them, intertwining them in a strange dance of sorrow and hope. I shall become the keeper of these shadows. I hollered, defiance sweeping through me with rekindled power. No longer shall I be fed upon, instead, I will forge a new path, and with that, an explosion of light erupted around me, vibrant and pulsating like the heart of a newborn star, consuming the shades of despair. The wisps of lost souls spiraled, finally free. The colossal Shadow Queen shrieked in fury as the light washed over her, unraveling her form until she was mere vapor against the brilliance, dispersing into nothingness. That I fell to my knees, exhilarated, exhausted. As the last ghost of despair evaporated, I felt the lingering pain fade. Sarah's laughter echoed a melody in the distance, fading slowly yet lingering. Each flicker of warmth surrounded me until I stood upon the threshold of a door once more, this time not surrounded by darkness but flecked with luminous light and warmth, pulsating like a heartbeat, welcoming me back to life. Yet, I knew that somewhere, deep down, the darkness still lingered. I could sense it, clawing to arise. It would be a constant struggle. Face it when it beckoned, whispering sweet nothings of despair and sorrow, stirring the cold tendrils that once fed upon my heart. But with every step I took, guided by memories and warmth, I held the power to resist, to mold that darkness into something stronger. As I crossed through the threshold, my heart exhilarated and weary, a haunting whisper echoed in my mind, chillingly resonant, "You may have cast us aside, but we will find you." Darkness is ever patient, and with that lingering promise echoing within me, I understood, as long as I possessed light in my heart, the shadows would loom on the edges, waiting for the moment of vulnerability to ignite once more, forever intertwining harmony and horror. I had become the guardian of Bota, continual reminder that the true journey begins when you dare to embrace what you fear most.